If you're a big Lord of the Rings fan, then you may know that earlier this month there was a large cast get-together in, of all places, Knoxville, Tennessee. And I'm allowed to say that because I live here. It was notable for being kind of the first big cast get-together since the plague happened. And it went terribly. Now, I do want to be very clear, the cast was all wonderful. The staff and volunteers and exhibitors that I interacted with all seemed very sweet, and I'm not holding any of them accountable for what happened. Everything that happened is entirely on the con organizers, Fanboy Expo themselves. And I'm gonna go out on a limb and assume none of the people responsible were even there. And if they were probably hiding. Fanboy is, and always has been, a local convention to me. Legitimately, the high school that I attended is where I typically park to attend because it is within walking distance of the convention center. So, believe me when I say, I have experience with this con, and just with Knoxville in general. And I thought I knew what I was getting into, but it turns out I did not. Fanboy is typically a pretty local convention. Usually they pull in 1 or 2 big name people a year. Previously, the largest and most famous person that I can think of off the top of my head would be William Shatner, attended a few years ago. Granted, that man will do anything if you pay him, so I'm not sure that really speaks to the caliber of people they usually draw in. It's typically, you know, voice actors. I believe they've had a couple of people from The Legend of Korra or maybe Avatar: The Last Airbender. They had some cast from the original live-action Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So it's people you've heard of, but oftentimes it's not blockbuster films. It's not usually half the main cast of one of the most famous movies of all time. And I will go ahead and say, I think the reason this is not getting more coverage in terms of everything that went wrong is because just fandom spaces in general are still reeling from everything that happened at Anime Expo, because that was the week before Fanboy. And the phrase I kept hearing at Fanboy was, "At least it's going better than Anime Expo," which is just such a low bar. Now, personally, I can only speak for what happened on Saturday, because that's the only day I attended, but a good friend of mine, we're gonna call him D, was there Friday as well, and I also know somebody who was there Sunday, but we're not really gonna talk about Sunday because nothing interesting really happened on Sunday. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna walk you through my experience and my day at the convention so that you can kind of see how I saw it and the realizations that I was coming to over time as I started to realize this is going so much worse than I thought was possible. So as you may be able to tell, I have very recently had surgery. I actually had surgery 2 weeks before the convention happened. My surgeon still does not know I was there, and honestly, I think it is best if she doesn't. I had my thyroid removed, and it's not a super huge deal, but it was surgery, so I planned ahead. I bought my tickets online, because ordinarily, if you buy your tickets online, you walk in, you go through security, you pick your wristband or your, badge up, and you go in. I'm thinking, like, ordinarily at a Fanboy, I would estimate like 10 to 15 minutes to get through the line. I was like, Lord of the Rings cast is here. I'll give them 30 or 45. Because it's going to be a little busier than usual, but surely they've planned ahead for that, right? Right? So the first thing that was like my scheduled time was, I believe, 3:30? 3:40. It was 3:40 was the photo op with Miranda Otto. She is Eowyn. She is the whole reason I was there. If it had been any other year and I hadn't had surgery 2 weeks prior, I would have been there for the whole weekend. I would have seen everybody. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. But because I had just had surgery, I was like, let's chill out a little. Let's only do Miranda, because She is my everything. So I needed to be there. 3:45, 3:50-ish was her photo op, so I was like, I'll get my autograph before, I'll do the photo op, I'll be out. So I need to be there 12:30, 1 o'clock. That'll give me plenty of time to be there. Plenty of time. I get there around 1 o'clock because I was slightly late running out the door. And as we are coming across Henley Street Bridge, I see the line. I'm going to put up a map with my hand-drawn squiggles on the screen to show you how badly this was going. But it was going really bad. So the first line I see is the one that runs down Henley Street and around the corner. And around, and it just kept going, it kept going. And then we finally get around to where I can see the front of the convention center, and I see the other line that is going all the way across the bridge. Keep in mind, it is July in Tennessee. It is in the 90s. It is hot. There is sun. I get out of the car. My mother drops me off. I stand at the front in shock, trying to figure out, am I really supposed to get in this line? What is happening? I start talking with another convention goer who is also in shock because I'd never seen this before at any convention. And then I text my friend D and I'm like, are you inside? What's happening? And I was like, do I really have to go through this line? And he said, I think so. I think it's the security line. I was like, what? So I chat back and forth with him a little bit more, and finally he says, you know what? I think there is another way in. He points me around to the entrance back by the food trucks, and I take at this point there were two other people I was talking with. I was like, I think I can get us in. We go back around by the food trucks, and there are 4 people in line. So I got in. It only took me 5 minutes. I was in by 1:05. If it were me, if I were in charge of this convention and I knew there was a back entrance, I would be out front pointing people, saying, let me take 20 of you at a time and we're gonna go to the back. So I get inside, I walk back through the convention center to the front and start trying to figure out, how do I get my wristband? As you might be able to tell, my throat is still slightly sore. That is a combination of still recovering from surgery, and I'm thirsty and probably need to go get a drink, and allergies, so I'm gonna get a drink. I am back, I have my drink. I also have this because it's going to come up. I was carrying this with me at the convention. It is a hand-carved and wood-burned sword. So I asked one of the convention staff, I said, I bought online, where do I go? Because I can see the ticket line, which at this point I'm assuming is for people who had not purchased their tickets online, and it was very long and I did not want to stand in it. So I said, where do I go if I bought online? And he points at the giant line. And I said, but I bought my ticket online. And he said, was it a VIP ticket? And I said, no, it was regular admission and then the Miranda Auto fan package. And he said, you have to get in the line. And I look at this man and I say, I just had surgery, that's why I bought my ticket online. I really shouldn't be in this line. And he said, that's policy. I could tell he felt bad for me, and I could tell he didn't want to put me in this line, but he was just doing what he'd been told to do. Get in the line. And once again, I'm going to pull up my map of the convention center, and I'm going to show you where this line went. It started at the door, it went all the way down one side, all the way down another side, and then it doubled back. That's a big line. I had another friend who was supposed to be there. We're going to call her R. I didn't have her phone number, so I texted her roommate and was like, pass on to R how to get in. This is the back entrance, because I knew R was not going to be able to stand outside, just like I was not able to stand outside. Just like many of the people who were standing outside should not be standing outside. Like, even healthy people shouldn't be standing outside. But I know for a fact, by what I saw on Twitter, that there were a lot of disabled people also being forced to stand in this line. Now, when I was in line, just like now, I was getting really thirsty, so I texted D and said, hey, can you grab me a water somewhere? This is where I will tell you texts were not going through. We can't completely blame the convention staff for that because it is in a large concrete building. But at some point, so many things were going wrong that, hey, maybe it was their fault. I don't know. Everything else seemed to be. I want to give them the benefit of the doubt and say this was just because concrete blocked cell service. But the Wi-Fi wasn't working either, so I couldn't even contact him through Wi-Fi. So I tried to get a hold of Dee and can't get a hold of him. So I see a water fountain, and this very nice woman behind me in line says, "I'll hold your spot, go get a drink." I run to the water fountain, and there is a sign on it that says it's out of order. Great, I go in the bathroom and scoop water into my hand, and I'm drinking out of it like some kind of animal. And then I get back in line, and at this point, R arrives at the convention and actually comes and finds me in line. Ordinarily, I'm very much not pro cutting line, but I was feeling sick and I needed someone with me because I just had surgery and I shouldn't be standing in line, which was why I bought my ticket online. So R comes and joins me and we stand in this line and we finally, remember, I got there at 1 o'clock. At about 2 o'clock, we finally get to the ticket booth. And I walk up, I have a QR code on my phone, and that is, connected to the tickets I bought. Ordinarily, what you do is they scan that QR code, they check your ID to make sure you are who you say you are, and then they send you on in. They didn't check my ID, they just assumed I was the person I claimed to be and sent me through. They also didn't scan the QR code, they just looked me up by name. What was the point of the QR code? What was the point of buying things online? What was the point of anything? So before they send me off, I said, "Hey, I have a weapon. Where is weapons check?" And they point me to the corner. And again, I'll mark where it was on my map because as you can see, it is not very visible. It's in a corner and it is just one folding table and one man. So I walk up to it, I'm like, "Hi, here is my sword. Can you mark me?" Because con etiquette says even obviously fake weapons should be tagged visibly. I have not removed the tag from my weapon, but you can't see it because he put it here. He specifically told me that he did not want it to be super visible because then it would ruin my photos. He did not want it to be super visible. That's the point of it. It's supposed to be super visible. I don't know if this is on that man or if he wasn't fully told what to do, but that's inexcusable. It just is. And again, he was in the corner, so I saw a lot of people just walking past him because they didn't see him. There were no signs pointing you toward him. So then I go and pick up my fan package, which was just some collectibles, a photograph, a lanyard, and then the 2 tickets, 1 ticket for the photo op, 1 ticket for the autograph. And then I try and go get in line for the autograph. And I'm told that it's already been capped. And I was like, "Okay, so you've capped her autograph line. I have a ticket. What do I do?" And they said, "She'll probably be back after the panel at like 4:45. Probably. You don't even know where Miranda Otto is going to be? Great." So I wandered the stage floor at this point a little bit, just trying to kill time before I went and got in line for my photo op. And it was really crowded. I'm gonna play some of the clips that I got and some of my photos just to show you how crowded it was. Also, I didn't see it myself. There was apparently an adult booth there. And I know it was there because R and D, who were both with me at this point, saw it, grabbed me, and turned me around and walked me away from it. They were like, none of us, we don't want to see this. It was just visible, apparently, is what I'm told. Just in a convention with children. There were also multiple booths that were very religious in nature, which I don't understand why you're at a convention. Or, like, why, if I was running a con, I wouldn't want them there. One of them was running, according to Reddit, some kind of scam where they would hand you books and then force you to pay for them. Big no-no. There was also this lady that, I talked to all of the authors that were there. That was the one thing I was kind of focusing on. There was this one lady who drew me in with this sci-fi erotica. And then she shows me this other book and she's like, yes, this is inspired by how much I love Luke Skywalker. And I was like, this is really cool. And then she takes me over to this other section and is like, do you know the Book of Revelation? What? Ma'am, we're talking about science fiction erotica and something that's based on Luke Skywalker fan fiction, and now you're Jesus? What? Yeah, that was her hook, was she drew you in with the sci-fi erotica and then tried to give you some, like, based on the Book of Revelations series. I ran away. I left very quickly. So then we had to try and get my photo op. Now I will tell you, I could tell from looking at the schedule that this photo op was going to be weird. And by weird I mean poorly run. Because Miranda Otto was scheduled at, I believe, 3:30 to be at a joint photo op with Dominique Monaghan. And then at 3:50 to be at her own photo op. And then at 3:40, no, not 3:45. And then at 4:15 to be at the Lord of the Rings panel. She's supposed to be in multiple places at once, I assume. So we get in line, or we try to, and we're told the only people who are allowed to get in line are VIPs. Fine. We leave the room where the autographs are and go back into this little narrow hallway where there's just a clump. Because if you're not in line as a VIP, they just put you in this clump. No attempt to make a line in the hallway, because why would we do that? So as we're standing in this line is when I start to feel unsafe. First, we see a woman in a wheelchair attempting to get through. And this is not on the convention goers, because someone in a wheelchair sits much lower than the average person's height. So I think people genuinely couldn't see her, because there was no effort to make crowd control happen on the part of the organizers. So my friends and I have to form a human chain to get this woman through. And I'm not saying that to make us look good, I'm saying that to say someone from the convention should have prevented that from happening. And then I'm standing there. There is a child on one side of me and the woman in the wheelchair on the other side of me, and I see what appears to be a real gun. I look for a cap, I look for a tag, I see neither. There is no orange duct tape, there's no zip tie, there's no safety cap. And I am standing in a convention with thousands of people, and I start to panic. The first thought through my head is I'm gonna yell, I'm gonna grab this child who is next to me, and I'm gonna run like hell to get out of here. And then the man steps aside, and I realize that he's part of a group cosplay of the villain Penguin from Batman. It is Penguin and two gangsters, and they look really cool. But they shouldn't have been allowed through the door without going through weapons check. And I don't blame them, because someone should have forced them to go to weapons check, but nobody made that attempt. And thankfully nothing bad happened, because I realized it was a, cosplay before I started a panic. But if I had yelled gun in a crowded room, what do you think would have happened? Crowd crush situations happen, and they're dangerous, and they happen because of things like that, because you have people with no effort at crowd control in this narrow hallway, and something causes a panic and everybody stampedes the door. I don't understand how it was allowed to get to this point. That's really the first time where I thought we might genuinely be in danger. So finally, they call us back into the room, and at this point it's just Dee and I. Our other friends, including R, who were with us, just decided to wait outside of this mess. And so we're finally allowed into the room, and we're put in this very narrow line. And then we just stand there and stand there. And then we're told, hey, FYI, her photo shoot with Dominique Monaghan is running over. She's going to be a little bit late. And Dee and I look at each other and we're both like, yeah, we could have told you that just from looking at the schedule. But fine, whatever. So I pull out my tickets. Again, remember, I have one ticket for the autograph and one for the photo op. I wish I'd thought to take a photo of them, but I didn't. Finally, at about 4 o'clock, I think it was almost 4 o'clock, before they finally came up and start hurrying us through the line, and that's when they take my ticket. The two tickets were two different colors. The woman grabbed one and took off, and by the time I realized she grabbed the autograph ticket, not the photo op ticket, it was too late. So that means I didn't have my ticket for my autograph, but also that she was clearly not paying attention to what she was taking, which again becomes a security risk. So we're shuttled through this line as fast as they possibly can, and literally I think I touched Miranda for a total of 5 seconds, and she smiled and was very sweet for those 5 seconds, and then we are shoved out the door. And so at this point we go and find our friends. And at this point we've been there about 2 hours and we're all really thirsty. But every single water fountain we saw said out of order or just do not use. So thankfully Dee's friend had a water bottle and we were able to fill that in a bathroom and drink out of it. But there was no water. The lines for the food trucks were 45 minutes or an hour. I talked to multiple people who walked down to Clinch Avenue, which is almost 3/4 of a mile away, and got food and drinks there and came back, and that was quicker than just going through the food lines. Inside is space for, I believe, 3, I definitely saw 2, but I think there's space for 3 little mini marts that usually have like drinks and sodas and bottled water. Only one of them was open. There was a lemonade stand, but I'm assuming the lemonade stand ran out of lemonade because they were closed. The mart that was open had almost nothing left. There was no water at the point that I went through. I ended up getting a sweet tea because I just needed something to drink. So then I have to go and explain to the person running Miranda's booth that, hey, I don't have my ticket. So I'm told as soon as Miranda gets back from the panel, and we hadn't gone to the panel. We intentionally decided to skip the panel, and I will come back to it later. So I was told just, hey, wait, Miranda's manager will be here in a few minutes. I'll talk to her, we'll get this sorted out. So we wander a little bit more. Dee ended up having to leave, so it's just R and I at this point. And we go back, and I said, hey, have you figured out what's going on? Like, I have the wrong ticket, but I haven't gotten an autograph yet. And Miranda's manager and Miranda had agreed to let me go through the line, even with the other ticket. So I get in line again with my prop sword, my very fake, very poorly tagged prop sword. And I think I was in that line about 45 minutes or an hour. And that was mostly because Miranda just was taking the time to talk and be nice to people, so I'm fine with that. By the time I did get it signed, obviously, and by the time I left, it was 6 o'clock, meaning I was at this con for 5 hours, and I did 3 things because of how long I was standing in lines. So now we're going to talk about some of what I saw online, because that was my day, and my day went a lot better than most. There were people on Twitter that were tweeting the convention to say, hey, I'm at this landmark in line, please come bring me water. There were people who stood in the outdoor lines for up to 3 hours. There were people who stood in those lines for 3 hours and then were turned away at the door because they were overcrowded. From what I can recall, the doors were closed officially about 3 o'clock. Also on Twitter, I saw people saying that the reason the line out front was so long was because there were 2 security officers. 2! And some people reported there was only 1. I don't know which is worse, 1 or 2, but that's pretty bad either way. You have to have more than 2 people to check in all of these con goers. Also, they hadn't even paid for the full convention center, so the way renting the convention center works is the more you pay, the more space they give you. I know for a fact there were large rooms that were not open or accessible. And that's not good. If I were in charge of a convention that had as many Lord of the Rings cast members as this one had, I would have opened the whole convention center. I would have paid for that. Because you know they made money. They don't even pay the volunteers that are there. Apparently, Saturday was the worst day from what I could see online. It usually is at most conventions, because by the time Sunday happens, things are winding down, and, you know, a lot of people work Fridays. So Saturday is always the busiest day, but that means you prepare for it. If you know Saturday's going to be busy, you bring in extra people. If you only have 2 security guards, you rent more. If you run out of water bottles and it's July and it's 90 outside, you send someone to Costco. I don't understand why this is difficult. It shouldn't be. I talked to a lot of people who said they skipped out on San Diego Comic-Con to come to this convention. And they're never coming back. This con, from what I could tell, they were running it and staffing it as if it was a normal fanboy convention, as if it was every other year. They did not take into account the fact that people were going to come from miles away to see the Lord of the Rings cast. I knew people were going to come in from out of town to see the Lord of the Rings cast. I knew that ages ago, in January, when they started announcing these things. Are they incompetent or stupid? Or were they just greedy? Were they just taking all of this money and not spending it on the convention? Or did they pay too much to get the Lord of the Rings cast? I genuinely was expecting a DashCon situation where they came out and started asking people for donations. I was waiting for that to give you an idea of how poorly run this con was. And no, it wasn't as bad as DashCon, and it wasn't as bad as Anime Expo, but it was pretty bad. You have the cast of the Lord of the Rings, and you didn't think it was going to be busy? You didn't even pay for the whole convention center? There's another convention center right across the street, and there are events that rent out both of them. And then I talked to people who couldn't find parking. And they were like, well, it's downtown Knoxville, I kind of get it. It's hard to park. Here's the thing about downtown Knoxville. We have a football stadium that seats 100,000 people. There were not 100,000 people at this event. Where was the parking? If we can fit 100,000 people downtown to go to a football game less than a mile from the convention center, you know there's parking. Fanboy just didn't reach out to any of the people who usually organize that and say, hey, can we get some shuttles to bus people in? Because that's what they do for football. They have parking farther away, and it is well marked, and then they bus the people in. Fanboy should have known to do that. There is parking downtown. They just weren't utilizing it because I don't know what they were doing. They were doing nothing. And this video is kind of all over the place, but I hope it gives you an idea of what was happening. And again, the staff were great. The people that were there were wonderful. There were beautiful costumes. I had fun. I was exhausted and in pain, and there's no excuse for that. There's no excuse for having someone come up to you and saying, I just had surgery, I planned ahead. What are you doing? And I'm not like trying to be entitled by saying I should have been allowed to cut line because I was, I just had surgery. But that's the point of buying your ticket online. Like, that's the expectation at every other con is when you buy your ticket online. I planned ahead. That's what people say disabled people should do. People always say, if you're disabled, you need to plan ahead. I did. Where were you, Fanboy? What were you doing? The people that weren't able to get in on Saturday, they were just handing out tickets to Sunday. So I was expecting Sunday to go terribly, but I'm assuming a lot of those people just were like, I'm not coming back and I'm not giving you another chance. Because why would you? Yeah, I really think the only reason this hasn't made more like news is because it went better than Anime Expo, which, that's such a low bar. That is an incredibly low bar. The other thing I meant to point out is they didn't seem to take into account the popularity of certain actors. They had the three Hobbits, Sean Astin, Dominic Monaghan, and Billy Boyd, all had, we're going to say, 30-foot wide autograph booths. The rest of and the booths also include their line, which zigzags back and forth. The rest of the cast, John Rhys Davies, I think, had 15 or 20 foot wide. He's Gimli. And then they had so they were all at one end with the wider booths. And then as you went this way, it got more narrow. And that is Sauron. That is the Witch King of Angmar. Some guy that played an orc. Graham McTavish, who was either Balin or Dwalin. Also some guy in Outlander. And Lindir. No, not Lindir, sorry, Haldir. Who, I mean, if they're at a convention and you're already there, yeah, you're going to go see them. But you're not going to fly, like, long distance to see these people the way you might the Hobbits and Gimli. And they had Miranda Otto shoved in between the Witch King and Graham McTavish. No, she wasn't even between the Witch King. It would make sense if she was next to the Witch King. She was in between Haldir and Graham McTavish. From just looking at it, and I don't have confirmation that this is what happened, it looked to me like the reason Graham McTavish and Haldir had such small booths, their booths were like 8 foot wide. I think originally they had Miranda Otto in the same size booth as the two of them, and then realized gay people and women love Miranda Otto. She's our icon. And she should have been down with your main draw. She is a draw. Anybody who knows The Lord of the Rings knows that Éowyn is going to be more popular than either Balin or Dwalin, and Haldir. Why? That just goes to show these people weren't... Did they not look at the number of fan packages they were selling? Because Miranda's line was... There were times I could have walked through Graham McTavish's line in 5 minutes. And Miranda Otto's was still at least an hour long when the convention officially ended at 6 o'clock. And from what I can tell online, the cast stayed, and good for them. But it seems like the cast stayed late to make sure everybody got what they paid for. So they all went above and beyond. Another story, once again from the Sean Austin fan page, is apparently Sean Austin is one of the organizers of the SAG-AFTRA strike. So he was on his phone texting with other organizers because the SAG-AFTRA strike officially started a couple days after the con. So I thought that was interesting. And really cool that he's involved in that. Good for him. But yeah, that was crazy and inexcusable. And this video is probably very long.